The richest people on the planet choose to take out millions of dollars worth of debt despite being worth billions themselves. Beyonce and Jay-Z took out a $52 million mortgage to buy their $88 million Bel Air mansion. And Mark Zuckerberg took out a $6 million mortgage to buy his house in California. But why would billionaires choose to take on debt when they could buy their homes with cash outright? It sounds so strange because we're taught that debt is a burden that should be avoided. But here's the thing, there's a difference between good debt and bad debt. And if you don't understand it, then you will never be wealthy. So in this video, I'll tell you the 3 ways that good debt can be used to make more money. And I'll also tell you when debt is bad and should be avoided. If you're new here, I'm Kiran and I'm a chartered accountant. If you're enjoying this video so far, then please hit the subscribe button. So how does debt make money? There are 3 main ways. The first way is that it's free money from the bank. It sounds ridiculous to say that a bank would give anyone free money, but when you borrow below the rate of inflation, the money is effectively free because inflation erodes the value of debt over time. When Zuckerberg bought his house, inflation was over 3% and he managed to get a mortgage rate of just over 1%. When inflation is 3% and the mortgage rate is 1%, the lender's return after inflation is less than 0. In this situation, the real interest rate, being the nominal rate minus the rate of inflation, becomes negative. Mortgage rates are really high at the moment, but the ultra wealthy will always have access to lower interest rates than the average person. That's because they are less risky to lend to, and also because the bank wants to establish a good relationship with them so that they come to them for things like business loans and the bank can make even more money from them. So that's why Mark Zuckerberg got a 1% interest rate on his mortgage in the first place. So if you can lock in low interest rates and borrow money for free, you don't need to use your own money. You can invest more of your capital into higher return investments instead, which is what we'll talk about next, and that's leverage. Leverage is the use of various financial instruments or borrowed capital, so basically debt, to maximize the potential returns of an investment. For example, you could buy a $500,000 house and put down the standard requirement of a 20% deposit, which would be $100,000, and borrow the remaining 80% from a bank. Then let's assume that the house appreciates by 5% in the first year. The house would be worth $525,000 and the gain on your $100,000 invested capital would be $25,000. If you had used your $100,000 to buy a house with cash outright, and that house also appreciated by 5%, your gain would be much smaller because you would have only made $5,000 on your $100,000 investment. So by using leverage, you manage to increase the return on your investment by buying a more valuable asset with the potential for higher returns. Celebrities can borrow huge amounts because of their high incomes and because they can often use multi-million-dollar turnover companies as collateral. So they can use leverage to its maximum potential to achieve the biggest gains without having to use all of their own cash. The third way that debt helps you to make money is by minimizing the opportunity cost. When interest rates are lower than the return on investment you can make elsewhere, it makes sense to use the bank's money and to free up your own money for other more profitable investments. Let's say you bought a house worth $500,000 in cash, and like in our last example, the house increased by 5% in the first year, so you made $25,000 on your investment. But if you'd gone down the mortgage route and borrowed 80% of the house value, you could have used your own $400,000 for more profitable investments. You could have deposited it into an ETF and potentially made 8% on that in a year, which would have brought you $32,000. Applying this 3% difference in margin doesn't amount to that much when applied to small amounts, but if you were to buy a house worth tens of millions, the opportunity cost of investing everything into your property would be much higher. Regardless of the opportunity cost, it often makes sense to borrow someone else's money so that you can free up more of your own capital to invest into more lucrative ventures. But this is where you could get lazy because it requires you to go out and find those opportunities. But it could simply be depositing the money into a high interest rate savings account if you're risk averse, or it might be investing it all into an ETF, which have historically had returns of 8% year on year. Or if you're a business owner, you could invest it all into your business, where the returns could be limitless, but so could be the risk. Jay-Z has done exactly this and has become a billionaire by using debt whilst investing and growing his fortune faster. He's invested in Uber, he's bought a champagne brand, has a JV with Bacardi, and launched a venture capital firm to continue investing in new startups. Debt can be incredibly powerful for all of these reasons, so why do we continue to think that debt is bad? Consumer credit, defined as personal debt used to buy goods and services, is what would classically be considered as bad debt. This is the debt that you use to buy things that don't make any money for you and often lose value as soon as you've bought them. Things like cars, expensive clothes, and even holidays all fall into this category. 80% of 25 to 34-year-olds in the UK use consumer credit. But unfortunately, society is too quick to judge people who use this type of credit and often assumes that they're bad with their money, but that's not always the case. The truth is, this type of debt isn't always bad. If you use this debt responsibly, meaning you pay off your credit card bill in full each month, and you're using it to build your credit rating, then it won't hurt your wealth at all. Even better, by building your credit rating, you're setting yourself up for financial success because you'll find it easier to get a mortgage and to negotiate lower interest rates in the future. But the problem lies when you start using this type of credit to live beyond your means. That means you're buying things that you can't afford and you're not paying off your credit card bill in full each month. That behavior, combined with how easily available this type of credit is how it turns into bad debt because it starts to erode your wealth. This type of debt can make it too easy for people to live beyond their means, and the interest rate, especially on credit cards, is exceptionally high, typically around 25%. When you're no longer using debt to increase your wealth or to build your credit score, and instead you're using it to live beyond your means, that's when it starts to erode your wealth, and that's when you shouldn't be using debt. Most people have grown up thinking that debt is a bad thing for all of the reasons discussed in this video and because they're not taught how to use it to build wealth. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on debt and how you use it. Thanks for watching, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next week.